The dark truth behind the playground. One clue, one bark, one race against time. It was buried beneath the fence line. A small pink sock, still warm from the skin of a little girl named Maya. The search had gone cold. The cameras at Bayfront Elementary caught nothing. No struggle, no scream. Just a van, idling, then gone. Everyone said it was too late. Everyone except Argus, a retired canine, German shepherd, labeled too old for duty. But when they let him sniff the grass by the east field, he froze. One paw lifted, one looked back. Then he led them to the sock. That was the beginning. What came next spanned continents forums where children were rated in silence, names traded like numbers, families torn open by shadows they never saw coming. Argus wasn't just searching for Maya. He was exposing something much bigger. And when he found the man in the poncho 2 days later, he didn't hesitate. This isn't just about a dog. It's about a promise unspoken, unwavering, a loyalty stronger than fear. And it all started with a sock. The final bell rang at Willow Glen Elementary at exactly 3:10 p.m., just as it did every Friday. The sound was crisp, familiar, so ordinary that no one thought twice. For the children inside, it was the opening note in the symphony of freedom. Backpacks slung over shoulders, feet pounding down tile floors, bursts of laughter echoing down hallways like confetti. Outside, the pickup zone woke up with its usual rhythm. Engines idled. Windshields gleamed under the soft spring sun. A row of SUVs inched forward in the pickup loop like cautious turtles. Parents leaned out of car windows, waving half-heartedly at teachers or checking their phones. Crossing guards swapped small talk about the weather and their weekend plans, their neon vests catching the afternoon light. It was, by every visible measure, a normal Friday. And yet, Argus didn't blink. He lay on the concrete just beyond the front steps, his graying muzzle resting between his paws. His ears twitched slightly, not in reaction to the noise but in awareness of its patterns. What was familiar, what wasn't. A dozen children had already run past him, some stopping to offer a quick pet or a giggle, others too distracted by the rush of weekend plans. But Argus didn't move. Not yet. 12 years old now, his once jet-black coat had softened into a smoky gray along his neck and back. The canine vest he used to wear had been replaced with a bright blue bandana labeled Therapy Support Dog. But anyone who looked into his eyes, still sharp, still locked onto everything, knew he hadn't forgotten who he used to be. He hadn't forgotten what he was trained to do. Sitting beside him on the bench, Officer Marisol Vega watched the children flow out of the building like a stream breaking past a dam. She had one arm draped casually across the backrest, the other holding a clipboard for the after-school therapy log. To an outsider, she looked relaxed. But anyone who'd served a single year on patrol, let alone 10, would have seen it. The way her foot stayed planted, her eyes tracked movement, her fingers tapped just slightly on the wood. The training never left. She hadn't planned to return to this kind of duty. Not really. After what happened in 2020, the thing she didn't talk about, Marisol had taken a leave from active service and shifted to community outreach. Therapy, dog visits, school safety, public trust. It felt less like retreat and more like breathing again. Argus had come with her. She always said he needed the peace, but truthfully, she needed it too. "Hey, Argus," a child's voice chirped. A blur of pink sneakers and messy pigtails skipped toward them. Hannah Ellis, 7 years old, and so very serious about everything from counting clouds to remembering every word of her spelling test, stopped right in front of the old German shepherd. She placed her backpack on the step with a gentle thud. It was purple with glitter stickers and a keychain shaped like a jelly bean. "He looks sleepy today," she said, kneeling to stroke the fur behind Argus's ear. "He's always watching," Marisol replied with a faint smile, "even when he looks like he's dozing. Right, old man?" Argus gave a soft, chest-deep exhale. His tail didn't wag, but his eyes flicked toward Hannah in acknowledgement. "Mom's late again," Hannah said matter-of-factly, sitting cross-legged beside him. Marisol glanced at the curb. "She's usually about 5 minutes behind. Traffic on the 84 is a monster at this hour." "I don't mind," Hannah replied, looking up at the sky. "I like counting green cars. Today I've seen 12, and one was a Tesla." Marisol chuckled. "That's a lucky number. Maybe make a wish." "I did," Hannah said, but didn't elaborate. For a moment, the scene quieted. Parents continued to pull in. Teachers waved goodbye. A seagull shrieked somewhere overhead. It was the kind of scene you could photograph and hang in a dentist's office. Safe, bright, ordinary. But Marisol shifted slightly on the bench. She hadn't heard Argus breathe for a few seconds. That wasn't like him. He usually let out slow, rhythmic exhales when relaxed. Her eyes slid toward him. He wasn't looking at Hannah anymore. He was looking at the street. More precisely, he was looking through it. His ears had rotated slightly, tight, alert. His paws flexed, the left one twitching just enough to make the leash on Marisol's wrist tug once. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "See something?" she murmured. Argus didn't respond. He just watched. And then a man stepped onto the sidewalk. He wore a charcoal peacoat, neatly buttoned, wire-rimmed glasses, shoes that looked expensive but well-worn. His gait was calm, too calm measured in a way that wasn't parent late to pickup, but someone with a plan. He paused at the edge of the dismissal zone, eyes scanning. He wasn't looking at the signs or the flow of cars or the adults. He was looking for someone. Then his gaze settled on Hannah. He smiled, raised a hand, and called out with the kind of softness that tried too hard. "Hannah, sweetheart, it's me, Grandpa. Come here, darling." Marisol felt her spine straighten. Hannah didn't move. She didn't even flinch. Her face went still, her eyes narrowing like she was trying to remember a song she used to know. But it wasn't recognition that spread across her face. It was confusion. And then a chill. "No," she said softly. "You're not Grandpa." The man stepped closer. "Sweetie, your mom called. She asked me to come get you. She's stuck at the clinic. You remember me, right?" "No," Hannah whispered again. Her hands gripped her backpack straps. "You smell wrong." Argus stood. Marisol's heart skipped. It wasn't just the motion, it was the way he moved, no hesitation, no lag. Just a silent, focused rise, as if his body had been waiting for this exact moment. His eyes locked on the man, his lips peeled back, and from deep within his chest came a low, guttural sound like gravel dragged across steel. Marisol tightened her grip on the leash, already reaching for her radio. The first growl had just begun, and Friday was no longer normal. The man walked with the kind of deliberate calm that made him invisible in a crowd. Nothing about him was rushed or uncertain. His coat buttoned neatly, his shoes polished but weathered, like he took pride in being understated. A thin breeze tugged at the edges of his peacoat as he stepped off the curb and onto the walkway just outside Willow Glen's front steps. He paused, not long, but just enough to scan. His eyes moved slowly over the cars, the kids, the parents, the noise. But his expression stayed fixed, like this was all part of the script, like he'd already seen it. And then he spotted her. Hannah Ellis, sitting cross-legged beside an old German shepherd with graying ears, her small frame relaxed but watchful, as if she somehow sensed she was being looked at before she even saw him. The man's face softened. He smiled gently, warmly, like an old storybook grandfather from some illustrated bedtime tale. He raised a hand, palm out like a friendly wave. And then he spoke. "Hannah," he said, his voice low and careful. "Sweetheart, it's me, Grandpa." The words floated in the air like feathers, soft, slow, and practiced. Marisol felt her shoulders stiffen. She hadn't moved yet, hadn't said anything, but Argus beside her had already leaned forward an inch, his ears lifting slightly. A low breath moved through his chest, so quiet it could have been mistaken for the wind, unless you knew how to listen. Hannah didn't wave back. She didn't smile. She didn't move at all. Her fingers curled around the handle of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. The sparkle in her glittery sneaker shifted slightly on the step as her foot slid back an inch, almost like her body made the decision before her brain could catch up. The man stepped closer. Not rushed, just another measured pace. Calm. Rehearsed. "I know it's been a while, Peanut," he said, voice like honey on dry toast. "Your mom got stuck at the clinic, so she called me. Asked if I could come get you." Still, Hannah didn't budge. The children around them continued to run to parents' cars. Teachers chatted at the door. A group of boys tossed a football across the grass. No one had noticed anything yet, because nothing looked wrong. Not yet. But Argus noticed. He hadn't growled, but his front paw crept forward again, his body beginning to shift weight without lifting fully off the ground. His nose twitched, not from excitement, not from curiosity, but from something else, something older, deeper, something learned. Marisol stood slowly from the bench. She let the clipboard slide onto the seat beside her, unnoticed. The man's smile hadn't changed, but his eyes flicked toward her for a fraction of a second, just long enough to acknowledge that she was there, just long enough to pretend she didn't matter. Hannah tilted her head just slightly. Her voice, when it came, was so small that Marisol almost didn't hear it. "That's not Grandpa," Hannah said. The man's smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. He tried again, softer now. "I know it's confusing, baby, but I promise your mom sent me. We had pancakes together once, remember? You were wearing that blue dress with the little owls." Hannah blinked. Her shoulders trembled. Argus took one step forward. His nails tapped against the pavement like a whisper of thunder. Marisol placed a hand on the leash, not pulling, just touching. Then Hannah looked up at her. Her voice cracked when she spoke again. "He smells wrong," she whispered. Marisol's breath caught. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" she asked gently, kneeling beside her. Hannah's eyes stayed locked on the man. Her tone didn't change. "Grandpa smells like cinnamon, and soap, and paper. This man smells like old wood and metal." The silence was sharp, like something fragile had just been tapped. Across the parking lot, a parent stopped mid-wave. One of the crossing guards narrowed her eyes. The man took another step, just half a stride. "Hannah, listen!" But Argus moved faster. With a sudden, explosive shift, the old shepherd stepped forward, not running, not barking, but placing himself fully between Hannah and the man. His stance was stiff, tail down, body rigid. His head tilted slightly downward, ears back, not out of fear, but in that silent language dogs speak when they're ready to decide for you. The man froze. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Argus growled. Not a performance growl, not a warning. A growl from somewhere deep, from that primal place where instincts lived, where memories of scent and sound were stored long after names were forgotten. Marisol's voice rose above the chaos, firm and steady. "Sir, please step back from the child." "I'm her grandfather," he snapped, eyes narrowing, tone sharpening for the first time. "She's confused, look. I have ID." He reached into his coat pocket, and Argus lunged. Not a full attack, just one powerful, controlled step forward, leash taut, body ready. The growl sharpened into a bark that slammed into the air like a starting gun. Now people noticed. Now voices turned. A teacher yelled for backup. Two parents rushed toward their cars. Marisol pulled hard on the leash, positioning herself between Argus and the man. "Sir, do not move." "It's just my wallet," he insisted, eyes wide now. Argus barked again, once, loud, final. His hackles were up. His chest heaved. Marisol's fingers were already on her radio. "This is Officer Vega at Willow Glen Elementary. Possible custodial interference. I need units at the main entrance immediately." And Hannah? She stood behind Argus, small hands clenched at her sides, tears beginning to spill quietly down her cheeks. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She whispered, to no one in particular. "Argus knows. He knows it's not him." The silence after Argus's bark was deafening. It hung in the air like fog thick, unexpected, unnatural in a place usually filled with the sound of children laughing, sneakers squeaking, and the low rumble of minivans pulling to the curb. But not now. Now everything had stopped. The man with the wire-rimmed glasses stood frozen mid-motion, his right hand still inside his peacoat, fingers likely wrapped around a wallet, but none of that mattered. The leash in Marisol's hand was taut like a tripwire. Argus pressed forward, body coiled, eyes narrowed to slits of amber focus. His growl deepened. It wasn't loud, not yet. It wasn't a warning bark or a performance made for attention. It was lower than that, older than that, a sound that came not from lungs, but from memory, from instinct, from a place dogs still carry even after the vest comes off. Marisol had heard that growl once before, years ago, on a rainy night outside a motel in Albuquerque, when a suspect came out the wrong door holding something silver. Argus had saved her life that night, and now that same sound was rumbling again. She shifted her stance. One hand gripped the leash harder, the other hovered near her utility belt. Not because she expected to draw a weapon, but because the muscle memory was already kicking in. The street cop inside her was waking up, fast. Hannah stood behind her, one hand clutching the hem of her shirt, the other trembling at her side. Her lips moved, silent, as if repeating a word to herself. Her eyes never left Argus. She trusted him more than anything right now. And somehow he made her brave enough not to run. The man cleared his throat. "I told you," he said, struggling to keep his voice even. "I'm her grandfather. This is all a misunderstanding." But Argus didn't misunderstand. He stepped forward again, 1 foot, a small movement but with the weight of a declaration. The growl sharpened. Hannah gasped, her breath catching in her throat. And just like that, the illusion shattered. A mother standing near the second pickup lane turned. Her eyes flicked from the dog to the man. She lowered her sunglasses. 2 boys paused mid-joke and looked toward the tension pooling in front of the school. A teacher at the main door took a single step forward, holding a clipboard to her chest like it might shield her from whatever was happening. "Marisol?" she called out, voice unsteady. Marisol didn't answer. Her focus was locked. "Sir?" she said carefully. "I need you to remove your hand from your coat slowly and step away from the child." "I told you it's just my wallet," the man replied, smile curdling at the edges. "I'm not—" "Now!" The firmness in her voice snapped like ice. The man hesitated, and then Argus lunged, not to bite, not yet. But with speed that seemed to erase his age, Argus surged forward, dragging the leash taut in an instant. He placed his entire body between Hannah and the man, his front paws planted like concrete pillars, his teeth bared not as a threat, but as a line that would not be crossed. This was no longer a dog growling. This was a declaration of protection. The man stumbled back half a step, hands now raised. His smile vanished. "Easy," he barked. "It's just a misunderstanding. Control your dog." But it was too late for optics now. People had noticed. More than a few. A dozen, maybe more. A father near the second row of cars was already pulling out his phone. One of the teachers disappeared into the building, presumably running for the front office. And the crossing guard, an older man named Rick, who'd worked this corner for 7 years, was already reaching for his walkie-talkie. "Something's wrong," he murmured into it. Marisol's voice was ice and instinct now. "You need to back away, right now." Argus's bark ripped through the air, raw, final, fierce. It echoed against the brick wall of the school like thunder. Hannah flinched. And that was it. The spell broke. The crowd knew something wasn't right. And the script the man had rehearsed, whatever quiet, calculated plan he had written out in his head, crumbled in front of dozens of eyes and one growling German shepherd who refused to let his instincts be ignored. A different teacher stepped out of the doors, phone to her ear. "Yeah, hi, this is Willow Glen Elementary. We need police assistance immediately. Possible attempted abduction. Yes, there's a child involved. No, he's not leaving. We have a retired officer on site and a K-9. Marisol stepped to the side of Argus, hand extended protectively toward Hannah. "I'm not going to ask again," she said quietly. "Step away." The man hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly took a half step back. Argus didn't move. He didn't even blink. Marisol glanced down, her voice almost reverent now. "You've still got it, boy," she whispered. Hannah, her voice small and shaking, said it again. "Argus knows." And somehow, that simple sentence held more weight than all the rest. The man didn't flinch when the police were mentioned, didn't run, didn't protest. He simply reached into his coat slowly this time, with eyes scanning the growing crowd, and pulled out a battered leather wallet. With a practiced flick, he opened it and held it up at chest level. "Richard Hale," he said smoothly. "Look my ID. I'm her grandfather." His voice softened, too polished, too calm for the crackling air around him. "Her mother said I could pick her up today. She was running late, told me to help out." He glanced at Hannah. "Didn't she tell you, sweetheart?" Argus growled again, sharper this time, no longer a question, now a warning. Marisol didn't move, didn't blink. She took in the ID with a glance. It looked real enough, though her instincts itched like a scar in the rain. No school pickup would go down like this, not without a call, not without clearance. But it was Hannah who broke the standoff. She stepped slightly forward, her voice clear, louder than anyone expected, louder than a trembling 7-year-old should ever need to be. "That's not my grandpa." A few people gasped. Someone behind them muttered, "Wait, what?" The man smiled wider, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Honey," he said, his tone syrupy, "you're probably just confused. I shaved the beard, remember?" But Hannah shook her head once firmly. "My grandpa smells like cinnamon and soap," she said, voice trembling now. "This man smells like metal and old wood." The words hit like a stone dropped into still water. Everything rippled. Even Argus seemed to tense more, picking up on her certainty. His ears flattened, body tightening like a coiled spring. Richard Hale blinked, thrown off. Come on now," he stammered, faltering for the first time. "What kind of—" "Bark." Argus snapped forward, voice thunderous. It echoed across the pickup loop like a crack of lightning. Startled parents jumped. One little boy dropped his juice box. The principal, who had just stepped outside, froze mid-step. Hannah didn't flinch. She stood taller now, close enough to Argus to feel his warmth at her side. She reached down and gently touched the thick fur at his neck. "He knows," she whispered. Marisol saw it clearly now. Not just suspicion, not just intuition. There was fear behind that man's eyes. Not the fear of misunderstanding, the fear of being caught. "Staff," she called, voice sharp. "Get Hannah inside, now." But Hannah wouldn't move. "No," she said again, louder this time. "I want to stay with Argus. He's telling the truth." Richard Hale took a small step back. The fake calm in his posture cracked ever so slightly. Argus barked again, this time even louder. He didn't lunge, but his stance shifted just enough to send the message, "Don't even think about it." From behind the front office doors, the school counselor and a PE teacher emerged, one already dialing. "We have an attempted abduction in progress," the PE teacher said into the phone. "Male, gray coat, late 60s, ID presented may be falsified, K9 involved retired police dog, child not harmed, scene active." Richard Hale held up his palms. "You're all overreacting," Marisol cut him off. "If her mother told you to come," she said coldly, "why didn't the office get a call? Why aren't you on the emergency list? Why does the child say you're lying?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he did the first honest thing all day. He looked at Argus and stepped back. That was when the principal raised her walkie-talkie and said 3 sharp words: "Lockdown Level 1." The patrol car pulled up in less than 5 minutes, tires kissing the pavement with a soft screech. Blue lights still spun, even though the siren had been killed halfway down the block. The 2 officers stepped out fast, but not rushed. Just controlled, trained. Marisol let out a slow breath. Her hand never left Argus's collar. The dog was silent now, posture stiff but still. Not relaxed, not hostile, just focused. It was the kind of stillness that only came from years of training and years of knowing when danger hadn't passed yet. Hannah stood close to him, her fingers still gripping the edge of his harness like a child would hold the hem of a parent's coat. She hadn't said another word since her metal and old wood comment. She didn't need to. Her silence was heavier than speech. One of the officers, a tall man with crow's feet and a bulletproof calm, stepped forward. "Mr. Hale?" he asked, already eyeing the ID in the man's shaking hand. "I'm Officer Durbin. We'd like to ask you a few questions and have a look through your belongings, if you don't mind." The gray-haired man hesitated, then shrugged like it was no big deal. "Of course. I've got nothing to hide." But his voice betrayed him. Too smooth again, too agreeable. Officer Durbin nodded toward his partner, a younger female officer named Torres. She moved around to the side and picked up the brown leather briefcase the man had set on the ground. It was scuffed at the edges, the metal buckles dulled from age or misuse. She unlatched it. The click echoed. The crowd, though mostly ushered back by staff, lingered behind school doors and windows. Marisol could feel the weight of their eyes. But all her attention was locked on that briefcase, and the way Argus shifted the moment the flap opened. His body tensed. He let out a single, low grumble, not a growl, but a pulse, a signal. Inside the briefcase, Officer Torres found a bottle of prescription sedatives, 3 industrial-strength zip ties, and a small pink baseball cap. She picked the cap up carefully. It was soft, faded, clearly well worn. Across the front, embroidered in purple thread, was a single name: Zoe. Marisol's heart skipped. Her eyes darted to Hannah, who was now gripping Argus even tighter. Hannah's voice was a whisper again. "That's not mine." "I know, sweetie," Marisol said gently. "I know." Officer Durbin's jaw tightened. He turned to his partner. "Get that logged. Secure the scene. Call in missing persons. Cross-check the name Zoe with current alerts." Officer Torres already had her phone out, voice clipped and low as she moved away. The man Richard Hale didn't say a word. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes did. That strange confidence he had been clinging to unraveled like loose thread from an old coat. He knew the questions were coming. He knew what they'd find. "Do you know a Zoe?" Officer Durbin asked him. No answer. "Sir, who is Zoe?" the officer repeated, firmer. But Richard Hale simply looked past him. Not at the school, not at Hannah. He looked at Argus, and for the first time since the entire incident began, his face cracked. Not with guilt, not with fear, but with resentment, as if the dog had ruined something carefully planned. Officer Durbin took a step forward. "We're going to need you to come with us." Hannah still hadn't let go of Argus. Marisol knelt beside her, her voice calm. "You're safe now. You were very brave." Hannah looked up. "Argus didn't let him lie," she whispered. "No, he didn't," Marisol replied. Her hand brushed over Argus's ears. "He never would." The wind picked up then, brushing past the trees lining the school sidewalk, tugging gently at the pink cap in Torres's hand. It flapped once in the breeze before she zipped it into an evidence bag. The wind had settled, but the tension hadn't. Officer Durbin shut the cruiser door with a heavy thud, sealing Richard Hale inside the back seat. The older man didn't protest. He just stared blankly out the window, expression unreadable, like a shell of someone who'd memorized the performance but forgot how it ended. Torres stood a few feet away, still on the phone with missing persons. Her voice was low but urgent. She kept glancing down at the evidence bag in her hand, the pink cap with the name Zoe in neat, faded stitching. Marisol crouched on the curb beside Hannah, who sat with her legs pulled up tight beneath her, one small hand resting on Argus's back. The dog lay still beside her, a living statue of protection, only his ears twitching every so often when someone moved too close. "I can feel his heart," Hannah whispered, pressing her palm into Argus's thick fur. "It's slow now, like mine." Marisol looked at her, surprised by the softness of the observation. "That's because you're both safe," she said gently. "He knows it's over for now." But even as she said it, Marisol's stomach turned. Because something wasn't over. Not really. A 6-year-old girl's name had just come out of a stranger's briefcase like a ghost in the daylight, and nobody knew what that meant yet. But it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like a thread unraveling. Officer Durbin stepped over. "You've worked with canines before, right?" he asked, his tone quiet but clipped. Marisol nodded. 12 years in the unit, retired 2 ago. Argus is mine now, but he still has the instincts." Durbin gave a brief glance at the dog, then lowered his voice. "That girl's name, Zoe Ramsey. She's real. She disappeared 6 weeks ago from her front yard in Montrose. Her mom went inside to grab a towel. When she came back out, gone." Marisol froze. "I remember that case," she murmured. "The pink cap." "Matches the one Zoe was last seen wearing," Durbin confirmed. "And that bottle of sedatives? Same kind found in a string of other missing child reports in the last 8 months, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona. All girls, all between 6 and 8. Marisol's fingers instinctively curled around the leash. "You think he's done this before?" "We can't prove that yet. But he's not just here for Hannah." A long silence stretched between them. Then Marisol whispered, "This wasn't random." Durbin didn't answer. He didn't have to. He stepped away to check in with Torres, who was now relaying a timeline to a third party over dispatch. Hannah shifted beside Argus, her fingers tracing slow lines over his shoulder. "He knew my name," she said, "before I said anything." Marisol looked down at her. "Did your mom tell anyone else to pick you up today?" "No." Hannah shook her head. "She always says it'll be her or Miss Dawson. That's the rule." A deep breath. Marisol's thoughts were churning now. The man hadn't come with a weapon. He hadn't tried to snatch Hannah by force. Instead, he brought a soft voice, an ID, a lie. He brought familiarity. He knew what a real grandparent might sound like, how they might walk, smile. Even the cadence of his steps had been intentional, non-threatening. That wasn't improvisation. That was rehearsal. Marisol felt coldness spread through her chest. Argus, as if reading her, let out a soft grunt and nudged Hannah's leg with his nose. And it struck her then, he had known first. Before the adults pieced it together, before the badge or the questions Argus had read the room, he'd read the man just like he was trained to. Torres walked over, lowering her phone. "It's her," she said quietly, holding up the bag again. "The Ramsey family just confirmed that cap. It was Zoe's favorite. She wore it every day for a month before she vanished." Marisol took a breath. She didn't want to ask the next question, but it rose anyway. "And her status?" Torres hesitated. "Still missing." No one spoke for a moment. Even the wind had stopped. Argus shifted slightly. Then, ever so gently, rested his chin on Hannah's knee. And in that image of an aging dog, gray around the muzzle, standing guard over a little girl whose name had almost been added to a list no one wants to write, Marisol saw the truth. This was never just about a single afternoon. It was never just a mix-up. It was a pattern, interrupted by a dog no longer on duty, but never off mission. And somehow, some way, Hannah had been next. Marisol stood slowly, letting her hand rest on Argus's back. "We need to widen the scope," she said quietly to the officers. "If he had Zoe's cap, he's connected. And if he's connected, we might have just stopped something much bigger." Durbin nodded grimly. "Then let's find out how deep this goes." Behind them, the cruiser pulled away with Richard Hale inside. Inside the vehicle, the man didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stared at the road ahead, expression empty, as if he'd already moved on to the next plan. The tires of the black Volvo hadn't even finished rolling to a full stop when the door flung open and a figure sprinted out, white coat flapping behind her like torn wings. Dr. Evelyn Ellis didn't pause to close the car door. She didn't register the murmuring bystanders or the cluster of officers near the curb. Her eyes locked on one thing only, the little girl sitting on the concrete, cradled in the shelter of an aging German shepherd's presence. "Hannah!" Her voice cracked. Hannah looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but calm, almost eerily still, and whispered, "Mommy." And then Evelyn was on her knees, skidding forward on gravel, scooping her daughter into her arms so tightly it seemed she might never let go again. "I'm here," Evelyn murmured, pressing her face into Hannah's hair, her voice breaking with every word. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Hannah didn't cry. She simply leaned into her mother's shoulder, small hands clutching the fabric of Evelyn's blouse, and whispered, "It wasn't Grandpa. He smelled wrong." That sentence shattered Evelyn in places she didn't know she still had. Behind her, Marisol stepped back, giving them space. Argus sat loyally at the girl's side, even as the embrace threatened to squeeze him out. His tail thumped once against the ground, then lay still. Evelyn pulled back just enough to cup her daughter's cheeks. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Did he say anything strange?" "No," Hannah whispered. "Argus didn't let him." At the name, Evelyn finally turned and saw the dog clearly. She froze. "Is that Argus?" Marisol said quietly, stepping closer. "He's the reason she's okay." Evelyn blinked. Her voice faltered. "I didn't even know he was still alive." "He is," Marisol said softly. "And today he remembered who he is." Hannah's arms clung tighter to her mother again. "He growled, Mommy. I felt it. It was like thunder in my tummy. And then he stood between me and the man, and I knew, like how you know you have to sneeze, but in your heart." Evelyn let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's the most Hannah way to explain instinct I've ever heard. But then her eyes darkened. "Who was he?" Marisol exchanged a look with Officer Torres, who stepped forward. "His name is Richard Hale," the officer explained. "Claimed to be Hannah's grandfather, showed ID, said you asked him to come." Evelyn's face paled. "I've never even heard that name." "That matches what Hannah said," Torres continued. "We searched his briefcase. He had sedatives, zip ties, and a pink child's cap. Belongs to another girl, Zoe Ramsey, missing for 6 weeks. Evelyn's hand instinctively gripped Hannah tighter. I was running late," she whispered. "Or ran over, and my pager was dead. I didn't even call the school. I was trying to get here as fast as I could. Oh, God. If he had gotten to her before—" She couldn't finish. Her breath caught in her chest like it had nowhere else to go. "You got here," Marisol said gently. "And she's here. Because of Argus. Because of Hannah's instinct. Because someone trusted her when she said something didn't feel right." Argus gave a quiet woof. Hannah reached over and touched his paw with one hand. "I told you," she whispered to the dog. "You're still a hero." Evelyn wiped her eyes. How do I even begin to thank you?" Marisol shook her head. "You don't. He did it because it's who he is. And honestly, so did she." Torres stepped aside to answer her radio, giving them a moment. Evelyn looked again at her daughter, really looked, and realized something had changed. Hannah had always been imaginative, intuitive, a child who colored outside the lines and described dreams like weather forecasts. But today, she had trusted something no adult could see, and that had saved her. "I don't want to go to school tomorrow," Hannah whispered. Evelyn stroked her hair. "You don't have to." There was silence for a moment. "Can Argus stay with us?" Hannah asked suddenly. "Just for a little. I sleep better when he's close." Evelyn looked at Marisol. The woman's expression softened. "He's not really mine anymore," she said quietly. "He belongs to whoever he chooses. And I think today he chose her." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then yes, he can stay." Hannah smiled, small, but true. As Argus lay his head across her lap, Evelyn finally let herself breathe. And for the first time in hours, the wind returned, not harsh, but cool, brushing through the trees like a whisper of relief. Something terrible had almost happened, but it hadn't. And maybe that wasn't luck. Maybe that was someone older than luck, forged in years of training, loyalty, and love. Someone who had waited in silence for the moment his growl would matter again. The office smelled like dry erasers and old air conditioning. A slow, humming quiet had settled in after the storm broken, only by the ticking of the clock and the shallow, steady breaths of a girl with dust on her shoes. Hannah sat curled into the tan vinyl armchair, legs tucked underneath her like a folded napkin. Her fingers rested gently on Argus's head, and his great body lay stretched beside her, calm now, but alert, ears flicking occasionally as if still filtering the echoes of what almost happened. Across from them, Dr. Evelyn Ellis sat motionless. Her white coat was draped over the back of her chair, her phone forgotten on the desk. In her lap was a crushed tissue, and in her eyes guilt, raw and glistening. "So," said Officer Torres gently, crouched to eye level, his notebook open but untouched. "Can you tell me again, sweetie, what made you know something wasn't right?" Hannah looked down at Argus for a moment, as if confirming something. Then she whispered, "He smelled wrong." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What do you mean, honey?" she asked softly. Hannah rubbed her nose with the back of her hand. "Grandpa always smells like cinnamon and soap. He uses that funny soap from the farmer's market, the one with goat milk and lemon. And he always has a mint in his pocket. Even his hugs smell warm." She paused, fingers twitching in Argus's fur. "But this man, he smelled like metal, and old wood, like the basement under the church. And his coat was too clean. Grandpa's coat always has cracker crumbs in the pocket and dog hair." The adults exchanged glances. Evelyn's hand gripped the edge of her chair. "But he smiled like Grandpa," Hannah went on, "and he used Grandpa's voice, almost. He even knew my middle name, but it didn't feel right in my belly. It was too smooth. Grandpa forgets sometimes. He asks me twice if I want apple slices. That's how I know it's him." She looked at Torres again. "And he didn't sound nervous. Not even a little. Not like when real grown-ups come to pick you up and worry if you've had a bad day. His shoes made no sound on the tiles. But Argus—" She trailed off, then gently reached up and touched her chest. "Argus made a sound I'd never heard. It rumbled here. It wasn't scary, not to me. It felt like thunder coming to hug me." Torres swallowed. His pen tapped lightly on the notepad but did not write. Evelyn's voice finally broke free. "Why didn't you run to him when he said he was Grandpa?" Hannah didn't answer right away. Instead, She gently pulled a strand of hair out of Argus's collar, like it was the most important task in the world. "Because Argus stood up. He's old, Mommy. He hasn't gotten up that fast since before the snow. But today, he did. And when he growled, I knew he was right. He knew before I did." Evelyn reached across the table and laid her hand over Hannah's. "I should have been here." "You are now," Hannah said, matter of fact. That broke something in Evelyn. She turned away, pressing a hand over her mouth as tears slid silently down her cheeks. Argus lifted his head slightly, nudged Hannah's elbow, then dropped his muzzle back onto her lap. It was an action that said more than comfort. It was confirmation. He had known, long before the words, long before the man. He had known that his girl was in danger, and he had become something he hadn't been in years, a shield. Torres stood, clearing his throat gently. "We'll need to talk more later. But for now, she's safe. That's what matters." He gave Hannah a small smile, then nodded to Evelyn and stepped quietly out of the room. Silence settled again, thick, but not empty. Evelyn moved her chair closer to her daughter and lowered herself onto the floor beside her. They sat like that for a while, mother, daughter, and dog held together by quiet and breathing and the knowledge that something irreversible had almost happened, and then hadn't. "Did you know," Hannah whispered after a long pause, "that Argus used to sleep outside my door when I was a baby?" "I remember," Evelyn said, her voice soft. "He'd bark if the wind knocked your mobile too hard. He still remembers, I think." "I think so, too." Hannah blinked slowly. "Can we keep him now?" Evelyn looked at the great dog resting like a silent guardian across her child's lap. "He was never really gone, was he?" "No," Hannah whispered. "Just waiting for something to matter again." Evelyn nodded, tears trailing once more down her face, but this time not from fear or guilt. This time they came from gratitude. By sunset, the story had already made the local evening news. The camera panned over the elementary school's front lawn, where balloons still fluttered from an earlier field day, now strangely incongruent with the gravity of the story being told. The news anchor's voice was solemn, but tinged with the kind of awe reporters use when a miracle brushes against the ordinary. It was the quick action of a retired police dog named Argus that prevented what authorities are calling a potential child abduction attempt at Brighton Elementary earlier today. The German Shepherd, who once served with the county K-9 unit, is now being hailed as a hero by both parents and law enforcement alike. Cut to a slow-motion shot of Argus resting in the school courtyard, his grizzled face angled toward the camera, eyes calm but alert. Someone had placed a child-sized medal around his neck, and the school principal, red-eyed but smiling, was seen feeding him a generous piece of grilled steak on a paper plate. "We owe this dog more than just thanks," the anchor continued. "He saw what we didn't. He acted when none of us could." On screen, Hannah was briefly shown being led away by her mother, her small hand tucked in Evelyn's, her other clutching a paw-print plaque stamped with the school's logo and the words, "Guardian of the Year." It should have felt triumphant. It didn't. Marisol leaned back from her laptop screen. The news footage paused mid-frame. The image of Argus, regal and stoic, sat frozen on the monitor, bathed in pixelated sunset light. She didn't smile. Instead, her jaw tightened. There had been something in that moment, not just alertness, not even protectiveness, something older, something personal. She could still hear it. The first sound Argus had made that morning, that low tectonic growl from deep in his chest. It wasn't a bark for help. It wasn't even aggression. It was recognition, as if something in that man Richard Hale, if that was even his name, had triggered not just a reaction, but a memory. She pushed her chair back and crossed the room to where Argus now lay sprawled by the front door. A bandana had been tied around his neck after the news segment bright red with little gold stars. He hadn't touched his trophy biscuits, and the steak he'd eaten had been only out of obligation. His ears twitched slightly as she approached, but he didn't move. Marisol knelt beside him. "You knew," she whispered. His eyes met hers. "I saw it on your face, Argus. That man didn't just smell wrong. He felt wrong to you." The dog let out a long breath, almost like a sigh. Then, slowly, deliberately, he laid his paw over her knee. Her chest tightened. "You didn't just react," she murmured. "You remembered." But remembered what? She looked toward the shelf where an old photo of Argus in uniform rested in a simple black frame. He was younger then, sharper. The handler beside him, Officer Dale Mendez, had died 2 years ago. Everyone said Argus had never been the same. She'd believed it was grief. Now she wasn't so sure. What if that man at the school wasn't just a stranger? What if there was a thread connecting him to a case from Argus's past? She walked back to her laptop, pulled up the public police records database, and typed in Richard Hale. Nothing. Then she tried Zoe Pink Cap, 6 weeks missing. That hit. Zoe Chan, age 6, vanished from her front yard in East Crestwood. No leads. She scrolled through the article, stopping cold at a grainy surveillance still. A man's silhouette, barely distinguishable, standing by a parked sedan with a pink booster seat visible in the back. Her breath caught. Even in shadow, the coat looked familiar. She hit print. Marisol turned back to Argus, who now watched her with something in his expression that looked expectant. "You weren't protecting just Hannah, were you?" she asked aloud. The silence was heavy, thoughtful. Then Argus closed his eyes, not in dismissal, but as if to say, "There's more. Keep going." A quiet knock at the door startled them both. It was Evelyn, pale but composed, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a manila folder. "I thought you might be digging," she said gently, stepping inside. Marisol took the coffee without a word. Her eyes dropped to the folder. "What's that?" "Medical records," Evelyn replied. "From when Argus was brought in 2 years ago after Dale died. I was on rotation that week. Something stuck with me then, but I didn't put it together until today." Marisol opened the folder. Inside were photos, x-rays, behavioral notes, a few scattered details about Argus's seizures and what they called PTSD-like symptoms. "I don't think Argus was just grieving," Evelyn said. "I think he was remembering something none of us ever understood." Marisol nodded slowly. The camera might have captured the medal, the stake, the applause. But this story wasn't over. Argus wasn't done. The hum of the fluorescent lights at the station was louder than it needed to be. Or maybe it only seemed that way because no one in the room was talking. Officer Liam Danner stared at the computer monitor. The ID card Richard Hale had handed over now scanned, cross-referenced, and flagged in red on 3 different databases. It was fake. High quality, yes, but still fake. "Not Richard Hale," Liam muttered to himself. "Not even close." He tapped a few more keys, and the real name surfaced. Gerald Emery Langston. Age, 61. Birthplace, Akron, Ohio. No current residence, no valid driver's license issued in over a decade, no employment history in the past 5 years. But there, buried halfway down the page like a fossil, was the entry that made Liam sit back in his chair. 1998. Investigative interest in the case of Annabelle Crane, missing, age 5. Charges never filed. His eyes narrowed. The screen flickered under the overhead lights as he pulled up the old report. The scanned file was grainy, faded. A picture of a little girl with strawberry curls and gap teeth smiled up at him from beneath a missing header. The words below were clinical. Last seen in front of her home. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses. One local man questioned and released Gerald Langston, former neighbor. The report stopped cold after 2 weeks. No follow-up, no resolution. He exhaled slowly, the breath thin and sour with the weight of time. Outside the interrogation room, Langston sat stone-faced in a folding chair. His peacoat had been confiscated, along with the briefcase, the pink cap, and a burner phone with no contacts. He stared straight ahead, unmoving, a still life in denim and coldness. There was something wrong with the way he held himself, not defiant, not even afraid, just waiting, as if he had learned long ago how to outsit the clock. Liam turned to the officer beside him, a rookie named Collins who'd only just transferred from Crestwood. "Pull the full report on Annabelle Crane and the one on Zoe Chan, side by side, now." Collins hesitated. "You think they're connected?" Liam didn't answer. He didn't need to. Across the glass, Langston slowly turned his head, as if he'd heard them through the wall. His eyes met Liam's. There was no recognition, no fear, just the kind of stare you'd expect from a man who had buried the truth so deep it became a part of him. Liam felt a shiver crawl between his shoulder blades. Back at his desk, he opened the printed missing persons reports Marisol had faxed earlier that day. 3 names, 3 girls, all under 7. All vanished without a trace within a 100-mile radius over the last 15 years, one from a gas station restroom, one from a shopping mall parking lot, one Annabelle from her own yard. All had similar details: no forced entry, no ransom, no evidence of struggle. And all 3 families had reported seeing a man. In a peacoat. Some even said he offered candy. Others said he claimed to know a parent. But none could describe his face in the same way. It was like chasing a shadow cast in fog. Until today. Until Argus. Liam's phone buzzed. He picked up, still watching the man through the 2-way glass. "Danner," he said. It was the lab. "The fingerprints match Gerald Langston," the voice on the other end confirmed. "But there's more. DNA links him to an unprocessed sample pulled from a child's sock found off Route 92 cold case from 2011. Liam's grip tightened on the receiver. "You sure?" "Positive. And we're rerunning the DNA from Zoe's cap now. You'll have confirmation in the next hour." He hung up without saying thank you. The air in the precinct had changed. Something heavy, old and poisonous had just been unearthed, and everyone could feel it. He walked to the glass, eyes locked on Langston. "This wasn't random," Liam said under his breath. "He's been watching, hunting." Behind him, another officer entered the room and handed over a crumpled note recovered from the man's briefcase. 3 first names written in pencil. One had been crossed out. The other 2 were Zoe and Hannah. Liam's jaw clenched. He turned away from the glass, heart hammering. Whatever Argus had recognized that day wasn't just danger. It was a scent from another lifetime, a memory unearthed, a predator once hunted, now caught in the light again. He pressed the intercom button. "Get Marisol and Evelyn on the phone, and someone from Child Services. We're reopening every case tied to this man." In the interrogation room, Langston tilted his head slowly, lips curling in something that wasn't quite a smile. But this time he wasn't the one in control. And thanks to a dog no one thought still had it in him, they were finally listening. The forensics lab at Eastwood PD wasn't built for horror. It was built for routine, petty theft, drug residue, the occasional domestic case gone sideways. But tonight, under the fluorescence of humming bulbs and the soft whir of processing units, it became something else entirely. Marisol stood behind the glass, arms crossed, face unreadable. She hadn't slept. Argus sat at her heel like a sentinel made of old bones and ash, his body still, but his eyes watchful. Inside, a technician named Lila wore latex gloves as she opened Langston's confiscated briefcase for the fourth time. They had already catalogued the obvious: wallet, keys, burner phone, pink child's cap, bottle of liquid sedatives. But something about the seams of the lining felt wrong, too stiff, too perfectly pressed. She slid a scalpel along the inner flap, a faint hiss of glue giving way, and then it appeared flat, dark, and deliberate. A USB drive, tucked inside a stitched compartment, wrapped in a plastic sheath like it had been waiting for someone bold or stupid enough to dig. Lila held it up with tweezers. "Got something?" Marisol's gaze sharpened. Argus let out a low exhale. 10 minutes later, in the digital forensics suite, the drive came to life. Not easily, it was encrypted, hidden behind 2 layers of password protection. But this wasn't Lila's first encounter with secrets. She'd cracked open cartel accounting files and blackmail dumps scrubbed by professionals. This one? Almost like he wanted to be caught. Once inside, the folders bloomed across the screen like bruises. Each one was named after a school. All public, all elementary, all within a tri-state radius. The first one, Shady Pines, 2021. The second, North Hollow, 2023. The third, St. Elmo's, 2024. Then, Evergreen Creek, current. Lila clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of images, candid, zoomed-in shots taken from a distance. Children at recess, children walking home, children crying beside buses, their small faces caught mid-expression, unaware they were being watched. But one folder froze the room. It was titled simply, Hannah. Inside, dozens of photos. Hannah in her red jacket, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Hannah hugging Argus outside the school fence. Hannah crouching to tie her shoelace, lips pursed, oblivious. Each shot was time-stamped. Each one felt like a countdown. "Oh, my God," Lila whispered. Marisol stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "How long has he been watching her?" Lila pulled up the metadata. "First image, 4 weeks ago. The most recent one yesterday morning." Marisol felt her chest tighten. She looked down at Argus. He was staring at the monitor, ears slightly back. It wasn't a growl he let out, but a whine, soft, barely audible, almost like mourning. Then they saw the next folder, titled Zoe, Trial 1. The room stilled. Lila didn't open it right away. Her fingers hovered over the mouse as though touching that digital wound would make it real. "Trial," she murmured. Like an experiment." Marisol's jaw clenched. "Open it." The folder contained 5 files, a Word document, 2 photos, and 2 audio files. The document's title was Progress Notes, Subject Z. They read, "Subject shows increased resistance to isolation after day 10. Reintroduction of external stimuli prompted emotional regression. Nightmares reported. Will attempt redirection therapy next week. No external identifiers, no names spoken. Good compliance under sedation." Marisol staggered back as if struck. Lila scrolled to the photos. One was of a small bedroom, sterile, windowless, with a child's mattress on the floor. The other was of a little girl, back to the camera, hair matted, sitting cross-legged. She was clutching a worn stuffed bunny. Marisol covered her mouth. Lila played the first audio file. A girl's voice, barely audible. "My name is Zoe. I'm not supposed to say it out loud, but I want to go home now." Then static. The second file was worse. The same voice, but monotone, scripted. "My name is... I don't remember. I'm safe. I'm not scared. This place is good." Then silence. Argus whimpered again, this time laying his head on Marisol's boot as if anchoring himself to something real. Lila sat back, eyes glassy. "We need federal involvement. Now." Marisol nodded slowly. Her voice broke as she said it. He wasn't just watching. He was selecting and practicing. Outside the lab, officers were already moving. Liam Danner had been briefed. The evidence would be handed to the State Bureau within the hour. But none of that would undo what had been done to Zoe, or what had nearly happened to Hannah. Marisol sank into a nearby chair. She looked at Argus, his silver muzzle, the way his chest rose and fell, steady as a tide. "You knew," she said softly. "Before anyone did, you knew." And in his eyes, steady, dark, and unfaltering, there was no pride. Only memory. Only duty. The list stretched farther than anyone expected. It wasn't just folders with names or schools. It was a system. A machine hidden inside that USB drive, clean, clinical, terrifying. On a second encrypted partition, forensic tech Lila found a spreadsheet buried under a false directory. She decrypted it slowly, piece by piece, her knuckles whitening with each new cell revealed, rows upon rows of names, children, ages 5 to 10, genders, hair color, notes like, "Timid, seeks approval. Not food motivated, responds to praise. Fits profile, recess monitor inattentive. Mother is often late." And next to each name, behavioral rating, a number between 1 and 5, and pickup schedule. It wasn't just surveillance, it was selection. Marisol stood behind the screen again, jaw locked tight. Officer Liam Danner sat beside her, stunned into silence, flipping between tabs, each worse than the last. "This is organized," he muttered. "Not one guy with a grudge or some twisted fantasy. This is a system." Marisol nodded, her voice low. "And they've done it before." She pointed to a column labeled Status. Some rows read Observed, others Filed. And 5, just 5, were marked Initiated. Zoe was one of them. One was blank, and one was labeled simply D, followed by the note, Relocated, non-compliant, disposal initiated. The air went still. Liam pushed his chair back. "We're not just dealing with a predator," he said quietly. "We're looking at a network, a supply chain." The words felt dirty leaving his mouth. Supply. Chain. Outside the lab, Argus shifted his weight on the cool tile floor. He had refused to leave since the files were found. His body was tired, but his eyes stayed locked on the door, as if guarding it from something no one else could see. Marisol glanced down at him. "You knew?" she said again. Argus blinked. His ears twitched, barely. And maybe it was projection or desperation, but it felt like agreement. Marisol turned back to Liam. He didn't just bark because the guy smelled wrong. He barked because he recognized pattern, intent. He didn't just sense a threat to Hannah. He sensed something older, bigger, tainted. Liam closed the laptop. "I'm putting in the request. Homeland Security, FBI, every acronym we've got. If even half of this is real..." "It's real," Marisol said. "That little girl said her name was Zoe." They fell quiet. Then a knock, soft, cautious. It was Evelyn Ellis. She stepped into the hallway, her face hollowed by exhaustion, but sharper, now controlled. She held Hannah's drawing in her hand, the one she'd made after the incident. Crayons, child's scrawl, a big brown dog, a man with no face, a chain. "I thought this was just a child's way of processing," she whispered. "But she said the man didn't have a face, that it was like something in a dream." Marisol's eyes narrowed. Evelyn handed over the picture. "She drew this 2 weeks ago. She said she'd seen him watching through the fence." The date in the corner matched the first photo of Hannah in the Evergreen Creek folder. Argus rose slowly to his feet and stepped forward. Evelyn crouched, hesitantly, holding out her hand. But Argus didn't sniff her palm. He walked past her, slowly, deliberately, and placed his paw on the drawing. Liam swallowed hard. "We're too late for some." "But maybe," Marisol said, voice catching. "We're not too late for the others." A low hum vibrated from Argus's throat, not a growl, not fear, resolve. The crayons were everywhere, scattered across the kitchen table like confetti after a quiet celebration. Soft yellow morning light filtered through the curtains, warming the floor where Argus lay, curled in his favorite patch of sun, his chest rising and falling with that steady, anchored rhythm Hannah now trusted more than anything. She sat cross-legged in her pajamas, tongue tucked at the corner of her mouth in deep focus. The paper was thick, and she pressed hard with the red crayon, outlining the swoosh of a cape fluttering behind a large brown dog. Above the drawing she printed carefully in block letters, "Argus, super listener. He hears what we can't." She gave him big eyes, not cartoonish but wide and deep, and surrounded his paws with little sound waves. Her final touch was a silver badge on his collar, shaped like a heart. Evelyn watched from the doorway, coffee forgotten in her hands. She hadn't seen her daughter this still, this composed, since the day everything changed. When Hannah looked up and smiled shyly, Evelyn knelt down beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Is that his cape?" Hannah nodded. "He doesn't need to fly. He just needs to stay. That's stronger." Evelyn took the drawing, hands trembling as she studied every line. The caption hit her hardest. "He hears what we can't." It wasn't just imagination. It was a kind of knowing. The kind of thing children feel in their bones before the world teaches them not to. She pinned it to the fridge with a ceramic magnet shaped like a lemon, and for a moment just a flicker. She imagined a world where this picture didn't exist, where Hannah had taken the hand of a stranger. Tears ran quietly down her face. Argus lifted his head, blinking slowly, then settled back into the sun. Hannah reached for a small metal bowl under the counter Argus's travel dish and filled it with dry kibble from the pantry. Then she carried it carefully to the wide bay window in the living room, the one facing the street and the moon beyond it. She set the bowl down with both hands, patting the floor next to it. Evelyn followed, wiping her eyes. "What's this for, honey?" "In case he wants to guard me from the moon," Hannah said matter-of-factly, adjusting the bowl just right. "He doesn't have to sleep here." "But if he wants to look out and listen, he can have a snack." Evelyn knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "He'll always listen, baby. Always." Hannah leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. Outside, dusk was beginning to stretch its fingers across the sky, and in that golden hush, with Argus curled like a sentinel of silence, and the scent of cinnamon and soap still lingering from Evelyn's sweater, something invisible settled between them. Not fear, not sorrow, but a bond. The kind that can't be faked, the kind that knows the difference between a bark and a warning, the kind that listens. The storage facility sat on the outskirts of town. Rows of rust-streaked units, each identical, each a secret sealed in corrugated steel. It was quiet, save for the soft crunch of gravel beneath the agent's boots and the hum of overhead fluorescent lights that never fully warmed the air. Agent Samir Klein adjusted his gloves as he crouched in front of Unit Number 47B, the number still flaking from its red-painted hinge. "This the one?" he asked without turning. Officer Liam Danner nodded, jaw tight. "Langston's name was on the lease. Paid 6 months in advance. Fake name, but same alias as the ID he showed at the school." The lock was clipped in 2 seconds. The door groaned upward, revealing an eerie stillness inside. At first glance it was clean. Too clean. A dusty tarp over a shelving rack. A plastic bin of tools. A single duffel bag shoved into the corner untouched, waiting. But it was the suitcase that stopped them both cold. Black. Leather. The kind that looks expensive but carries something else entirely. Klein stepped forward, kneeling. "Let's log this and pop it." The suitcase clicked open under gloved hands. Silence stretched as both men leaned in. Inside, a burner phone, screen cracked, battery removed. Candy wrappers, the cheap kind kids love. Watermelon sour belts, lemon fizzers, a partially unwrapped grape lollipop still stuck to the fabric lining. A folded photograph, worn at the corners. Klein opened the photo carefully. A girl smiled up at them. 6, maybe 7 years old. Red hair and pigtails, freckles scattered across her cheeks like constellations. She wore a Bayfront Elementary t-shirt. "Maya Sanderson," Liam said quietly. "I recognize her. She went missing 4 weeks ago. Coastal town 2 hours south." Klein's voice dropped. "Not reported kidnapped. Wasn't it a custody case?" Liam shook his head. "At first, yes. But her father had a solid alibi. The case went cold. Fast." Klein stared at the girl's face. Langston had eyes on her, too. He looked around the unit again, slowly. This wasn't random. This was ritual. System. He pulled out a thin manila folder from a side pocket. Inside, printed maps, marked routes, doodles, and a post-it, sticky side curling, Trial 2, playground proximity, 7 minutes. Liam exhaled, low. It's not just kids. He's tracking routines. Klein nodded grimly. Targets. Trials. This was never about impulse. From the hallway, another officer called out, "We're sweeping the rest of the units. Found another padlock with the same cut pattern. Might be his, too." Klein zipped the suitcase closed. "Get a forensic team down here. Every print, every fiber. I want to know what brand of gum was chewed in here." Liam looked down at the case. "Maya's been gone for a month, but this candy's only a few days old. That silence returned, thick, choking. Somewhere another child might still be waiting. And the man who carried this suitcase, he was just one link in something far larger. The interrogation room was dim, humming with the fluorescent flicker of institutional exhaustion. A laptop screen cast a cold glow onto the table's metal surface, where Agent Klein leaned forward, scrolling through extracted data from the burner phone found in the suitcase. Each tap of the keyboard felt louder in the silence, each message a whisper from something monstrous. On the screen, a simple thread of texts, bare and efficient. Bayfront Option 1 confirmed. ETA 48 HRs. Do not engage Carter girl again. Too noisy. Klein sat back, eyes scanning the words for a second time as if willing them to make less sense. But they didn't. They made too much sense, chilling, surgical sense. Liam Danner stood behind him, arms crossed, lips pressed into a flat line. Carter girl, that's Hannah. Klein nodded. And Bayfront Option 1. That's Maya. We're not looking at a failed kidnapping. We're looking at tiers, prioritized options, targets. The air felt heavier now, as if the room itself understood something irrevocable had surfaced. Liam stepped closer. He didn't just stumble onto Hannah. She was catalogued. But she was noisy, Klein added quietly. She noticed details. She remembered smells. She hesitated. And Argus... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Argus had not just barked at danger. He had shattered it, broken protocol, defied human uncertainty, and inserted himself between a predator and a girl who still believed her grandfather wore the smell of cinnamon and soap. No other child had that guardian. Liam leaned on the table, knuckles white. He was told not to go near her again, not because she recognized him, but because the dog did. Klein turned the laptop so the screen faced him. I keep thinking about the phrase, too noisy. It's not just about sound. It's disruption. It's risk. A still frame of the text glowed against the dim. The words, simple, final. Do not engage Carter girl again. Too noisy. It made Hannah sound like static on a wire, like a complication in a system that was never meant to be challenged. Outside the interrogation room, voices rose, a news crew shouting questions, boots echoing, phones ringing. But in here, in this small, stale room, the truth settled like ash. Klein looked up. We're going to need federal task force support. If Langston was operating with options, that means there's a chain of command and logistics. Liam's face hardened. You think he's just a field agent? Klein didn't blink. I think he's expendable. There was a long pause, filled only by the soft hum of the laptop fan and the weight of the words hanging between them. Liam looked toward the small television in the corner of the room, muted but rolling footage. Argus sitting beside Hannah as she drew in the school courtyard, the local station captioning it, K9 Hero Saves First Grader. Klein followed his gaze, then said softly, She didn't just survive. She broke the pattern, Liam finished. They looked at each other, and for the first time since the case began, neither of them felt like they were just catching up to something terrible. They were finally getting ahead of it. The coffee in Marisol's mug had long gone cold. She didn't notice. The file in front of her, a printout of every known movement Gerald Langston had made in the last 2 years, wasn't giving her what she needed. Not the thing that kept her up last night. Not the tremble in Argus's body, even after the man had been taken away. Not the way Argus had circled that briefcase, like it remembered something before it ever smelled anything. That dog didn't just alert to danger, he remembered it. And that meant this wasn't over. Marisol picked up her phone and scrolled until her finger hesitated over one name. Deanna Quill. She hadn't talked to her in nearly 3 years. Not since Deanna had transferred out of field duty after a failed raid left her with a shattered collarbone and enough guilt to last a lifetime. But if anyone could help her put the pieces together now, it was Deanna. She pressed dial. It rang only once. "Marisol," came a voice, low and familiar, like the static of memory through a landline. "Are you still mad at me?" Marisol asked without ceremony. A pause. "I was never mad. I just didn't want to see anyone who still believed." "I stopped believing for a while, too," Marisol admitted, her voice quieter now. "But I've got a dog who didn't, and a little girl who should have vanished but didn't. I need you." Another silence. Longer this time. Then, "What do you need?" "Temporary clearance. Just long enough to get into Bayfront Elementary with Argus. There was another girl, Maya. We found her photo in a second suitcase. I think she's next. I think this was never about one child." Deanna's breath crackled through the line. "I'll call in the favor." By noon, Deanna Quill stood outside Marisol's precinct, her badge clipped to a lanyard that hadn't seen sunlight in a year. Her hair was shorter now, shot through with more silver, but her stanch shoulders square, weight balanced, hadn't lost its edge. "I told them I was shadowing for a federal canine program," she said, stepping into Marisol's office without waiting to be invited. "They bought it. We've got 2 hours at Bayfront before school lets out." Marisol blinked. "That fast?" "I owe you. And I owe the little girl from Glen Hollow." The air between them shifted. Marisol didn't press. Instead, she clipped Argus's harness into place and opened the back door of the cruiser. "Ready, boy?" Argus stepped in like he already knew where they were going. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a soldier reporting for duty. Bayfront Elementary shimmered in the late afternoon sun, its playground swings still swaying from recess past. But something about the place felt sterile, cleaned, not just by janitors, but scrubbed emotionally, like fear had passed through and been buffed away. They walked the perimeter slowly. Argus sniffed tufts of grass, light posts, the edge of the staff parking lot. Then his body froze, not alert, not tense, still. Marisol's hand moved instinctively to the leash, but Argus didn't lunge. Instead, he sat and let out a single low whimper. "What's he doing?" Deanna asked. Marisol crouched beside him, touched the ruff of fur behind his ears. "He remembers something," she murmured. From inside her pocket, she pulled out the printout of the photo found in Langston's second suitcase. Maya Sanderson, age 7. Red hair, missing front teeth, eyes that looked like they expected to be forgotten. Marisol held the photo at her side, not even showing it to Argus. But he turned his head toward her pocket and pressed his nose against it gently, mournfully. Deanna exhaled sharply. This was her pickup zone, Marisol said, or was going to be. A bell rang in the distance. "Time's up," Deanna said. "You think he's connected to others?" "I think Argus doesn't just remember faces," Marisol said. "He remembers what was supposed to happen but didn't, and where." Deanna looked down at the dog who'd just rewritten a federal case file. "You're saying this dog has a memory?" "No," Marisol whispered. "I'm saying this dog remembers what we missed." The sun had started to dip lower now, casting long shadows across the Bayfront Elementary soccer field. Argus trotted just ahead of Deanna and Marisol, ears forward, nose twitching with purpose. They moved silently along the perimeter fence toward a weedy strip between the playground mulch and the overgrown hedgerow behind the parking lot. Deanna scanned the area. This is the last blind spot before the road. If someone was watching, this is where they'd wait. Argus slowed near a stretch of spindly bushes. His head jerked back and forth, quick, deliberate sniffs, and then he froze. One paw lifted. "Marisol," Deanna said softly. Marisol crouched beside the dog, following his gaze. Half buried in the dry dirt beneath the bush was something pale and soft. At first it looked like a scrap of paper or a torn napkin. But when Marisol brushed the soil aside, the truth surfaced. A child's sock, tiny, pink, faded butterflies on the cuff. She held it up with gloved hands. "Maya's?" Deanna asked, voice tight. "Has to be," Marisol said. "Look at the wear. She drags her left heel. This side's thinner." Argus sat next to her, tail thudding once, as if confirming. He didn't bark, didn't move, just waited. "Let's check the feed," Deanna said. "There's a school security cam at the north fence right above that utility box. If someone came through this way, they'd be on tape," Marisol finished. The security footage was grainy, time-stamped 4 days earlier. The camera didn't rotate, but it had a clean view of the rear access road and the fence line. For 5 minutes, the screen showed nothing but the slow dance of eucalyptus branches. And then, at 3:12 p.m., a white van appeared. It rolled up slowly, engine humming, and stopped at the exact stretch of fence where Argus had sniffed out the sock. No markings, no plates, tinted windows. Marisol leaned closer to the screen. "Wait for it," Deanna whispered. But nothing happened. No one got out. The van just idled. 30 seconds, 60, 1 full minute. Marisol's fingers clenched around the tablet. At 3:14, the van pulled away. "That's it?" she asked, almost not believing it. Deanna exhaled. 2 minutes of nothing and everything. Marisol rewound, slow-framed the clip. No driver stepped out, no child in view. But right before the van moved, the rear brake lights flashed. Once. A signal. "We're looking at a dry run," she said. "He was testing the timing, maybe even waiting, but something stopped him." She looked down at Argus, now lying beside the table. Or someone stopped him. Later that evening, back at the precinct, the sock was confirmed. Maya's initials stitched into the cuff by her mother, a habit she kept after her daughter left daycare. Deanna stood in the hallway outside the evidence room, staring out the window. "They were going to take her," she said quietly. "This week. Maybe that day. But Argus interrupted it," Marisol said. "He wasn't even assigned here, but somehow he knew." Deanna nodded, slow. "We're not chasing just a predator anymore. We're chasing a system." Argus looked up from his spot on the floor and gave a quiet huff. It wasn't a bark. It was a reminder. It started with a drizzle. The kind of coastal mist that made sidewalks blur at the edges and turned playground laughter into hushed echoes. Harborview Elementary sat quiet that morning, except for the faint screech of wet sneakers and the snap of lunch boxes opening. Parents shuffled through the gate, umbrellas tilted, trying to stay dry while saying their goodbyes. But Marisol wasn't watching the kids. She was watching the perimeter. Argus stood beside her, taut on his leash, golden fur damp, but eyes sharp. Every few seconds, his nose lifted, tasting the air, sensing something even the wind hadn't caught yet. Then he stopped. His body locked still, muscles coiled, and then a soundless growl. Marisol followed his gaze. Across the street, half-shadowed under a jacaranda tree, stood a man, face obscured by the hood of a yellow poncho. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even pretending to move, just standing there, one hand inside the poncho, the other resting limp by his side. He didn't smoke, didn't check a phone, didn't glance at the school. But he was too still. Marisol's breath caught. "Argus?" she whispered. He barked, loud, deep, final. A bark that didn't ask permission. It warned. The yellow poncho man flinched. Just barely. Marisol unclipped the leash. "Go!" Argus launched forward like a shot, not chaos-calculated pursuit. His paws hit wet concrete with the precision of a dancer and the drive of a missile. The man in the poncho darted away, fast, trained, not the clumsy shuffle of a loiterer caught off guard. He vaulted over the curb, into the alley, knocking over a trash bin. Marisol took off behind them, radio pressed to her lips. "Suspect fleeing eastbound behind Harborview Argus in pursuit. Yellow poncho, unknown race, medium build, possible connection to Langston case." She didn't wait for a reply. The alley twisted. The man cut left, then right, through a back parking lot behind a shuttered toy store. Argus never wavered. He didn't bark again. Just ran silent and sure, ears pinned, nose low. The man scaled a chain-link fence. Argus did too. Claws found gaps in the wire and momentum did the rest. He cleared the top and hit the ground hard, rolling once, then back on his feet like nothing happened. The man looked back. And that's when he made the mistake. He slowed, just a blink, just to see how close Argus really was. It cost him. Argus leapt, latched onto the hem of the poncho, and yanked. The man stumbled forward, crashing into a stack of wooden crates outside a supply shop. Within seconds, Argus had circled again, teeth bared, not attacking, just blocking, hurting, holding. The man lunged towards the stairwell, but Marisol was already there, taser drawn. "Don't!" He froze. Rainwater pooled at his feet. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing under her hood. "Hands where I can see them." He raised them, slowly. Inside the poncho, he was wearing a shirt with the logo of a local pest control company. Fake badge, fake name tag. But the eyes were wrong, flat, dead, the kind of eyes Argus never trusted. Back at the station, fingerprints told the rest. The man was not in any local registry. His prints were filed under a different name, Paul Nilsson, but he'd used over a dozen aliases in 3 states. No permanent address, no employer on record, no children, but 3 confirmed sightings near schools flagged in Langston's files. Marisol stood outside the interview room, watching him through the one-way glass. He sat still. Again, too still. Argus lay curled at her feet, but his ears remained perked, watching, listening. "Not just Hannah," she murmured. "Not even just Maya." She looked down at the dog. "You knew, didn't you?" Argus didn't move, but his tail tapped the tile, once. The rain hadn't let up for days. It poured with the kind of quiet persistence that soaked through bone and blurred the edges of everything. But Argus stood motionless beneath the lean-to overhang, his amber eyes fixed on the side door of the derelict community center off Orchard and 6th. They'd been watching it since dawn. Inside, power had long been cut, but a faint glow from battery lanterns spilled between the planks. Marisol, earpiece tight, stood just behind the canine, one hand resting gently on his harness. The tip came from a truck driver, Someone who saw a yellow poncho get tossed into a dumpster behind the rec center late the night before. FBI intel cross-referenced utilities. No one was supposed to be here. But someone was. And Argus knew. He hadn't barked. He hadn't moved. He'd simply stared. That stillness, that absolute certainty, was always the tell. The command was soft, almost a breath. Seek. Argus slid into the dark like a whisper of wind. No hesitation. Inside, the smell hit him first, cheap plastic, synthetic sugar, and something else. Tension. One hallway. Cracked linoleum. A door at the end, half open. Marisol and Agent Danner followed at distance, quiet but ready. Glocks drawn low. A creak. Then a shadow. And Argus moved. Like lightning laced with instinct, he tore down the corridor and leapt. A crash. A cry. The man went down hard, thudding against the peeling wall, crumpling under the weight of 70 pounds of muscle, purpose, and fury. Argus clamped down, not to injure, just to hold, pinned, snarling, but surgical. "Hands up!" Danner's voice roared. The man obeyed, pale, shaken, blood trickling from a scrape on his chin. He was in his 50s, wiry but gaunt. The name on the fake ID in his wallet read Ethan Kroll. But his real name was Calvin Royce Miller. Age 52. Occupation unknown. History: 2 prior arrests sealed due to mental evaluation concerns. No known employment in the last 7 years. Had bounced addresses across counties like stones on a lake. Marisol stood over him, her boots in a puddle of rainwater tracking through the hall. "You hurt a child?" His mouth twitched. "No," he croaked. "I study them." At the precinct, while Miller sat cuffed and silent under a harsh fluorescent glare, Marisol opened the contents of his coat pocket. Inside, a folded list, creased into eighths. 3 names, 3 schools. 1. Maya Sanderson, Bayfront Elementary. 2. Louise Hatcher, Glen Ridge Charter. 3. Rena El Amin, St. Helena, School for the Arts. Next to each name, a column of handwritten numbers, check boxes, notations like eye contact, noise tolerance, startle reflex. Under Maya's name, in red ink, Option 1, proceed. And below that, reaction to visual triggers promising, next trial 2 days. Marisol didn't sit down. She just stood in the hallway outside the glass, holding the paper like it was dipped in gasoline. Inside the room, Agent Danner leaned in. "What do you mean, trial?" Miller blinked slowly, as if weighing the worth of the truth. "We were testing reactions," he finally muttered. "Kids' ability to sense distress, to feel when something's wrong, pattern recognition, empathy under pressure. Maya, she was the next trial." He looked at the floor. Hannah was a misread. She was too loud. The dog got in the way. Danner's knuckles whitened. "Who's we?" No answer. Just the mechanical hum of the overhead fan and the sound of Argus's claws clicking softly on the hallway tile. Later that night, Marisol sat in the evidence room, the folded list in front of her. She stared at the red ink, at Maya's name circled twice. Then her eyes drifted to Argus, curled on his mat, but awake, watching. She reached out and ran her fingers along his spine. "You knew," she whispered. He didn't move, but his tail tapped once, soft, steady, and full of something deeper than language, a knowing that had saved more than one life. The interview room was cold by design. Fluorescent lights flickered just enough to feel wrong. The air smelled of old plastic, disinfectant, and the weight of things no one wanted to name. Across from Agent Danner, Calvin Royce Miller sat with the defeated posture of a man who knew time had run out, but hadn't decided if he'd tell the truth or just watch them squirm. Danner didn't press. He waited. A tactic. Silence had a way of peeling people open. Calvin exhaled, slow, then looked up, not defiant, not scared, just tired. "You think we were just creeps in a van?" he muttered. Danner didn't answer. Calvin leaned forward, cuffed hands twitching. "It's bigger than that. You don't get it yet, none of you do." He paused. Then almost conversationally, "We used to post dog videos." Danner blinked. "What?" "It started on pet forums. Nothing shady. Training clips, service dog stuff, reading emotions in animals. Then it turned." His voice lowered. "Some threads got password protected. You needed to contribute to stay in. Uploads, comments, ratings." Danner kept his face blank. "Ratings of what?" Calvin met his gaze. "Children." In the observation room, Marisol gripped the railing, jaw clenched. Behind her, a junior agent scribbled furiously, but she tuned it out. Her attention stayed locked on the screen Calvin's face lit from below, like some kind of sermon from the deep. He continued flatly. They had categories, columns: invisibility quotient, IQ for short, predictability index, emotional noise, caretaker responsiveness. If a kid got a high EN emotional noise, they were out. "And low EN?" Danner asked. "They were options." His voice cracked. They liked quiet kids, lonely ones, the kind no one asked about until it was too late. He swallowed hard. No fuss, no drama. "No dogs." Danner didn't flinch. "What was your role?" Calvin stared at the floor for a long moment, like he was deciding whether to take the final step off a ledge. "I was a scout," he said finally. "And Langston?" The name was a knife. Calvin winced, then nodded. "He was the architect, built the back end, designed the filters, set up the drop boxes. Said our job wasn't to hurt anyone, we were just flagging anomalies." Danner's pen stopped. "Anomalies?" Calvin's smile was warped, hollow. "That's what they called kids who noticed. The ones who looked too long, heard things they weren't supposed to. The ones who had dogs like that." He tilted his chin toward the one-way glass toward the hallway, where Argus waited just outside, ears sharp and still as sculpture. Back in the hallway, Marisol stared at her own reflection in the glass. Argus sat at her side like a sentinel, his eyes locked on the man inside. She whispered, "You knew what he was long before we did, didn't you?" Argus didn't move, but he didn't need to. The truth had already bled through the walls. Later that night, the forensic team cracked part of the encrypted files recovered from Langston's USB. Beneath the folder labeled Zoe, Trial 1, they found the same rating charts Calvin described this time, in spreadsheet format. Each line was a child. Each cell, a judgment. Columns of acronyms like RTI, Response to Isolation, CCL, Caretaker Contact Level, and RE, Recall Effectiveness. Hannah Carter had been flagged early. High perceptiveness, unstable variable, do not proceed. But one note stood out written months ago before any of them even knew the name Gerald Langston. Pilot program stable. Primary architect in place. Alpha Scout reactivated. The line was marked in green. Marisol stared at it in silence. Alpha Scout. That was Calvin, and they weren't even close to done. It began with a flicker on a monitor at 2:47 a.m. The digital forensics team, hollow-eyed and running on vending machine coffee, finally cracked the pavilion portal, an innocuous-looking URL buried beneath 6 layers of spoofed domains and backdoor redirects. It didn't scream evil, it whispered it. A white screen blinked to life. Centered, a login field. The username had already been pulled from Calvin's burner. The password? A string of numbers pulled from the metadata of Maya's photo, her school ID. Reversed. Click. The site opened. No logo, no welcoming page, just 4 tabs. Candidate submissions, drop schedules, behavior ratings, transaction logs. Silence overtook the room as the agents leaned in. No one said it, but they all felt it. Somewhere in this sterile interface was a map of harm. A ledger of innocence, weighed, measured, and sold. Marisol was called in within minutes. They projected the data on a war room screen. The room dimmed, as if the system itself knew this wasn't meant for daylight. Under candidate submissions, there were 23 profiles. Not full names, just aliases, timestamps, attached photos. But to anyone who had looked into those eyes even once, it was unmistakable. Hannah Carter, Maya Sanderson, and 8 others, some marked with a red tag, confirmed intake, some tagged yellow, in transit, and then green, clearance pending. Those ones still had a chance, still had time, maybe. Marisol's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. Pull every child. Cross-reference every timestamp, school records, GPS pings, bus schedules, surveillance cams. I want to know where every one of them is right now. Argus, lying quietly in the corner, lifted his head, his ears turning slowly toward the screen, as if even he understood. Under the Behavior Ratings tab, the columns scrolled endlessly, neatly organized, coldly clinical. Social engagement, low. Guardian vigilance, mild. Speech volume average, quiet. Pet presence, unrated. Each note like a pin through a butterfly wing, and beside it, videos, unlisted clips uploaded via secure proxy networks. Schoolyard footage, parking lot shadows, children with backpacks too big for their shoulders walking alone, some waving, some looking back one too many times. A clip from Bayfront Elementary showed Maya brushing red curls behind her ears at recess, a silent file, 30 seconds long. She smiled once. That was enough for someone to click Add to Watch List. One agent vomited in the hallway. Another punched the table hard enough to fracture a knuckle, but the site didn't flinch. Under drop schedules, addresses appeared masked at first, but they were no match for bureau tools. Most were storage units, remote properties, vans with phony moving company decals. One was in Georgia, another in Minnesota. 3 were in California. They had dates next to them, some in the past. One was scheduled for tomorrow. A red dot blinked. Riverside, CA, 6:00 p.m. Next to it, an ID. Candy 2117, alias Zoe. Transfer Calvin Miller. They had planned to move Maya. That dot wasn't just a time and place. It was an intention, and it had almost worked. Later, when Marisol stepped outside for air, the sky had already turned to ink. She leaned against the cold brick wall behind the bureau field office and stared into the dark, haunted by digital ghosts. Children were being marked like products, watched like prey. And the worst part? None of it screamed. None of it broke glass or spilled blood in the street. It all lived in silence, in files, in code, in the abyss. Inside, Danner scrolled to the bottom of the list. There was a field labeled Next Round. 10 blank slots. 2 were already filling in, new aliases, new time stamps. But something was different. In one comment box, beneath an early submission, someone had typed, "Carter girl error. Dog is too loud. Recommending shift to Bayfront batch." Danner stared at that one line for a long time. Dog is too loud. They meant Argus, the silent sentinel who had started this unraveling, the one variable they hadn't accounted for, the one whose instincts had saved Hannah, uncoiled a system, and pulled them all child by child out of the abyss. Danner stood up, turned to Marisol, and said the words like a quiet oath. "We're going to burn it down." The folder was misfiled under language samples, until a junior analyst cross-referenced its code and found the truth. Marisol stared at the single photograph. A girl, no older than 8, purple sweatshirt, cropped brown hair, eyes not looking at the camera but past it, distrustful. On the back in pencil, Anaka, Prague. No date, no surname. The Europol translator frowned. No record in the Czech registry, but her name appears twice, both sealed under international interest. Marisol's jaw tensed. How recent? 6 months. 6 months when Langston traveled to Prague under a fake company, Lodestone Analytics, and suddenly the net tightened. They found the orphanage, long closed. The address now redirected to a storage lot. No human face. But deep in a forum, an old intake log by a nurse listed Anaka M. Noted night terrors, fear of flash photography. Next to her name, 214 to 9J. The same ID in Pavilion's database. Danner brought up the burner phone they seized from Langston. Most images were corrupted, but the one of Anaka remained. Metadata led them to an airstrip, Ruzinya District, private terminal, 5 months ago. They hadn't misplaced her, they moved her. Interpol cross-checked aliases tied to Lodestone. One led to a child in Sofia. Another, a cargo manifest from Hamburg. And then NCMEC flagged a buried tip, an encrypted cafe submission warning of undocumented children trafficked for behavioral testing. No follow-up had ever been done, until now. Argus paced the hallway, no scent, no trail, but the tension was a language of its own. Marisol crouched. "We're not done," she whispered. Then Danner entered ashen. They weren't just choosing kids, they were testing how far they could go. Before we noticed. He opened a manifest. 10 crates, labeled Behavioral Research, Live Sample Containment. Departure, Prague. Arrival, Galveston, Texas. ETA, 6:45 a.m. tomorrow. Marisol stood. "We're going." The raid was silent. No sirens, no shouting. Only the crunch of boots in snow. A teal-painted cottage. One lopsided shutter. Intel confirmed. This was where they'd taken her. Anaka. Her name passed between agents like prayer. Marisol waited just beyond the breach line, beside Argus. His harness trembled, not from fear, but focus. "Green," came the signal. They moved. Rooms cleared. Back hallway breached. Argus lunged before the handler finished the queue, door ajar. A fluttering curtain. Inside, a mattress. A coat folded neatly. And in the corner, a girl. She didn't cry, didn't run, just watched. Wide-eyed. Still. Same eyes, same angle, same distrust. Marisol knelt but didn't speak. She placed a protein bar on the floor, then waited. Tiny fingers reached. Then from her pocket, the girl pulled a creased slip of paper. Marisol took it gently. A postcard. Cartoon German Shepherd. Oversized ears. A red heart. Scrawled in crayon, "You were never forgotten, Blitz." Marisol blinked. Blitz. A retired K-9, missing since 2021. Same year the orphanage shut down. Someone had left her a lifeline. Someone couldn't stay, but planted hope anyway. And Anaka believed. In the extraction van, wrapped in thermal blankets, Anaka touched Argus's paw. Her first word was a whisper. Big ears. Argus leaned into her hand. Marisol felt her lungs expand for the first time in weeks. Not victory, breath. News tickers ran quietly in airports, cafes, homes. Operation Second Son, coordinated arrests in Berlin, Miami, Portland. Interpol confirms pavilion links spanning 7 years. Victims found across 3 continents, most under 12. Marisol sat on the floor of her living room, curtains half drawn. Argus at her feet. He hadn't barked in days, just listened. The TV flickered. Langston's name appeared again. She touched his fur, graying now. He blinked once. "You knew," she whispered. The phone buzzed. Deanna. Langston's login was cloned. He didn't start it, just perfected it. Marisol didn't respond. Let the screen fade. Argus shifted paw, resting lightly on her boot. Not it's over. Just, I'm here. Children walked home under quiet skies. The world hadn't ended. But something had. Something invisible. Something massive. And Argus? He lay not in sleep, but in stillness, guarding something deeper. The doorbell rang. A courier handed her a thick envelope. Inside, transcripts, evidence, and on top, a photo, a girl with dark hair. Beside her, a German shepherd, ears too big, crayon at the corner. Thank you for remembering. Argus nudged the photo once, then stilled. Marisol placed her hand on his back. They didn't speak, just stayed, not in mourning, not in celebration, but in witness. The rotunda smelled like varnish and grief. Marisol wore her black jacket stiff across the shoulders, metal pinned just over her heart. Argus lay beside her, not asleep, not restless, just present, just distant. He'd been offered a stage cushion. She declined. He didn't need comfort. He needed space. Inside the Capitol dome, suits filled the room. Cameras, politicians with pocketed speeches. A girl in the front row, Maya, clutched a stuffed dog with ears too big. Marisol's throat tightened at the sight. Speeches began. Governors, directors, acronyms, all polished, all distant. Argus didn't blink. When her name was called, applause rose. She stepped forward slowly, not for honor, but for what wasn't being said. "I wasn't going to speak," Marisol began, "because part of me still thinks this isn't over." Stillness. We talk about systems, policies, protocols, but sometimes the system fails, and something else steps in. She looked at Argus. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't care who it offended. He knew. She touched his fur. He didn't move. He didn't need to. After, they exited quietly. No interviews, no podcast offers. Just the corridor, sunlight, and a quiet bench behind the Capitol. Argus lay beside her. The wind brushed her jacket. Laughter drifted nearby. It wasn't closure. It was peace. The hallway of the elementary school still smelled like crayons and disinfectant. Hannah clutched her new backpack. The old one, still tagged and sealed in an evidence bag, was long gone. Inside the front pocket, a stuffed German shepherd, 10 inches tall, no bark, no tail, but heavy with meaning. Argus. The real Argus had stayed with her through everything, the panic, the crying, the interviews. When she asked, "Will I ever be normal again?" he hadn't answered. He just stayed. That was enough. Now, her teacher, Mrs. Juneau, opened the door. Students turned. No teasing, just quiet curiosity. Hannah clutched the plush dog tighter. "Come in, Hannah," said Mrs. Juneau, warm. She walked to her old desk. It felt smaller, like she'd outgrown more than just height. A boy whispered, "Is that the real dog?" She shook her head. "No, but it remembers just like he does." Later, Mrs. Juneau asked if anyone wanted to share something they'd learned. Silence. Then Hannah stood. She held the plush dog. "It's okay to say no," she said. "It's okay to scream." Her voice held steady. "If someone asks you to keep a secret that hurts, you can tell. That's not betrayal. That's bravery." She looked down. "He barked. That's how they found me. So don't be afraid to make noise. Even if you think no one's listening, someone is." Silence. Then soft thank yous. A drawing in her cubby. A cookie. A bench shared at recess. Hannah smiled. For now, Argus was enough. The FBI war room didn't look like justice. It looked like grief. Walls lined with names. No colors, no categories. Just first names. Cities, ages. Some with green check marks rescued. Some with red X's. Most blank. Marisol stood quietly near the back. She'd seen war boards before. Trafficking webs, murder networks. But these were children. An analyst spoke. 214 confirmed from pavilion data, cross-checked with NGO lists. She nodded, scanning the board. Anaka V. Safe. Maya R. Safe. Emily C. Unknown. Jin Park. Blank. No logic to the layout. No comfort in patterns. Just human weight. In one corner, an image. Argus. Not posed. Just sitting outside police tape. Head tilted. Eyes listening to something unseen. Beneath the photo, the one who made us look closer. No medal. No title. Just truth. An agent whispered, "If we'd missed that sock, we wouldn't have gotten Maya. We wouldn't have followed Calvin." Marisol touched the image. "He never needed evidence," she said. "Just trust." The agent nodded. "He gave us that, before we earned it." She stood there, surrounded by maps, blinking cursors, and unfinished cases. Then she pulled a pen from her pocket. Below the caption she wrote, "You saw them before we did." She whispered, "Thank you," and left. In the hallway, Argus was waiting, not wagging, not demanding, just watching, like he always had. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that settled deep into the walls, into the fabric of the curtains, into the breath between seconds. A peace that didn't announce itself, but lingered. Hannah padded barefoot across the kitchen floor, the tiles cool beneath her. She carried a small ceramic bowl in both hands, filled not with cereal or soup, but something else entirely. Kibble. It clinked softly as she set it down, just beneath the open window. Same hour, same ritual. The street outside was still, bathed in the dim orange glow of a flickering lamppost. A moth danced near the glass. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked to life, its rhythm, distant like a memory. But Hannah wasn't looking at the street. She was looking at the sky. The moon was almost full tonight, round and solemn, low enough to cast soft silver beams across the sill. She leaned close to the screen, placed her chin on her hand, and whispered, so gently the wind might have mistaken it for its own breath. In case Argus wants to watch the moon again. She didn't say it to be heard. She said it because some promises aren't about being answered. They're about keeping the door open. Behind her, the floor creaked. Evelyn didn't say anything as she entered, just stood beside her daughter, in matching silence, watching the same sky. In the reflection of the window glass, they were a pair of shadows, one taller, one small, mirrored in quiet devotion. Neither asked if he would come. Neither said he was gone. They just watched and waited. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once. Not sharply, not in warning, just a single, low sound, like a greeting carried on the breeze. Hannah smiled faintly. It didn't matter if it was him or not. What mattered was that she remembered, that she'd kept his spot by the window, that the bowl was full, that the moon was up, that someone, somewhere, was still listening. Because love, real love, doesn't always need a leash or a nameplate or a backyard to belong to. Sometimes it's just kibble by the window, and the hope that, wherever he was, he knew he was still welcome, still watched for, still loved. Evelyn finally broke the silence, but not with words. She placed her hand gently on Hannah's back, a quiet anchor. And for a moment, in that small kitchen, time folded. No trauma, no case files, no bad men, just a girl, a mother, a window, and the echo of pause that once stood guard long after everyone else had fallen asleep. The sky didn't storm, it whispered. A soft, steady drizzle fell from low-hung clouds, barely bending the tree branches lining Sycamore Avenue. The pavement glistened, mottled with reflections of porch lights and puddles. Somewhere, a wind chime offered a slow, hesitant melody. Marisol adjusted the collar of her jacket and gave a short whistle. Argus padded alongside her, no leash needed. His gait was even now, but slower, not because of age, because he was listening. They walked past the old tennis courts, their nets sagging from disuse. A newspaper clung to the chain-link fence, its ink bleeding in the rain. Behind the courts, a narrow greenway that led toward the elementary school and the small, forgotten park behind it. Argus paused. Just slightly. Not enough to raise alarm, but enough to shift the rhythm. Marisol noticed. She'd learned to trust the silences between his steps. The subtle way his shoulders tensed. How one breath could say more than a bark. "What is it, partner?" she asked quietly, lowering her hand to brush his fur. He didn't answer, not the way people do. But his ears twitched. He turned his head slowly to the left. Not the school, not the street, the trees. A thicket between two backyards. Untrimmed, overgrown, too narrow for kids to play in, but wide enough for someone to pass through. Or wait. Marisol followed his gaze. For a second, There was nothing. Then, a motion, too quick to register. A branch settling, a shimmer of wet leaves folding back into place. She didn't move, didn't reach for her weapon, didn't raise her voice. She just watched. Argus didn't bark, but he stood still, rigid as stone, eyes locked into the undergrowth, tail low but alert. His muscles taut, like a spring being held back by sheer restraint. A car passed behind them, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. Its headlights cast long shadows through the brush. For a moment, the outline of something, a shoulder, a coat, flickered across the foliage, then vanished. Marisol took a breath. Not fear. Focus. They were in a different chapter now. No task force, no warrant, no headlines. Just a woman and her dog, walking a neighborhood that still healed, one house at a time. But that didn't mean all the ghosts were gone. Sometimes the quietest streets held the loudest memories. She glanced down. Should we check it out? Argus didn't move, just held his gaze. Then slowly he lowered his head. A signal she knew well. Not now, but remember. Marisol nodded, tugged her jacket tighter, and began walking again. They passed the bench where she'd once seen Maya draw chalk flowers, the corner where Evelyn had waited in the rain with her umbrella for Hannah's first day back, the low fence where someone had once left a stuffed animal ears too large, fur too familiar. Each place still carried weight, not pain, but memory. And somewhere beneath the drizzle, beneath the steady beat of drops on roofs and leaves and old mailboxes, Marisol felt something else. Watched. Not with malice, not with presence, but like a story still being read by eyes they couldn't quite see. Argus brushed against her leg. Not needing comfort, offering it. They continued down the path, the neighborhood folding in around them like a page being gently turned. And behind them, in the thicket, nothing moved, but the leaves still glistened, and somewhere a pair of watchful eyes remained. The sky was clear that night. No clouds, no moon, just stars, sharp and endless above the dark fringe of trees behind Marisol's house. A hush had settled over the neighborhood, the kind only known to places that had come through something, not untouched but still standing. Argus lay stretched out on the porch. One ear twitched now and then, half alert. His chest rose and fell slowly. His nose moved subtly with the breeze mapping the world through the scents it carried. Damp grass, distant pine, the faint hint of someone grilling 2 streets over. Nothing urgent, nothing wrong. But he stayed outside anyway, by choice. His front paws crossed, head resting just low enough to seem relaxed, but his eyes open, watching, always watching. Inside the house, the living room glowed in warm lamplight. A blanket was draped neatly over the couch. Marisol sat nearby with a mug of tea going cold in her hand. She wasn't reading, wasn't looking at her phone, just sitting, looking at the mantel. Above it, a framed piece of crayon art rested like a quiet medal. It wasn't complicated child's lines and soft colors, but it held weight. A German shepherd, drawn with a wide chest and 2 big ears, standing on a patch of green that might have been a park. Above the dog, written in careful, slanted block letters, "He hears what we can't." Hannah Marisol smiled softly. There was a time not long ago when she didn't think they'd ever reach this quiet. Not her, not Hannah, not Argus. So much had been taken. So much still hung unresolved in the spaces between news reports, courtrooms, safe houses. But even in unfinished stories, some truths hold. Outside, the porch light hummed. Argus blinked at a firefly drifting lazily toward the grass. He didn't chase it, just watched it float. Marisol stepped out quietly and sat on the wooden steps beside him. She didn't say anything at first, didn't need to. The night had that kind of silence, the good kind, the kind that says, "For now, you're safe." She sipped her tea and stared at the stars. Then she spoke, half to herself, half to him. "You know, they gave me a plaque," she said. "Said I was brave. Said I helped bring down something dark." Argus shifted slightly, but didn't look at her. Just listened. "But courage," she continued, "isn't what they think it is." She reached out and let her hand rest gently on his back. "Courage isn't loud. It doesn't always shout or kick down doors. Sometimes—" She paused. Her voice caught, then steadied. "Sometimes it just growls once when no one else does. And that saves lives." Argus exhaled slowly. His tail moved, not in a wag, but in a quiet thump against the wood. Just once. As if to say, "I know." The stars kept burning above them. Behind them, the world slept. But they stayed out a while longer, woman and dog, survivor and sentinel. Not because they had to. Because some part of them understood the work is never really done. In a world that often moves too fast to notice quiet courage, stories like Argus's remind us to slow down and listen. Behind every bark, every watchful gaze, is a devotion so pure it asks for nothing in return. German shepherds, with their loyalty etched deep in bone and breath, teach us not only how to protect, but how to feel. Through Argus, we see that heroism isn't always found in headlines. Sometimes it lies in stillness, waiting by a child's side, sensing danger before it speaks, standing guard long after others forget. His story is a tribute to the silent protectors among us, not just dogs, but those who choose to care, to act, to believe in goodness even when the world goes dark. Let this be more than a story. Let it be a call to value life, especially the lives that love us without condition. Adopt when you can. Speak when others are silent, and never underestimate the power of a four-legged companion who hears what we can't. Because sometimes the strongest hearts walk on pause, and the most important battles are won by trust.